And we're live, which is very exciting. So I have here today an amazing gentleman called Nick Elston. And I first met Nick a couple of years ago, and his speaking the way that he does his speaking gigs and the message that he brings to the world is absolutely phenomenal. And he talks a lot about anxiety and how to manage it so that you can excel in business and life. And I'm very, very privileged that he is giving up half an hour of his time today to share with you his journey and some tips and some ideas on how to overcome anxiety yourself. So Nick, massive welcome to you. Thank you so much for being here. That was a very short intro. Could you intro yourself? That would be awesome, please.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. Hey, everyone. Yeah, it's really great to be here, actually. And like I said, I can't believe how long it's been since we last spoke. Okay, so let's start with the basics. My name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. Yeah, it's a job. It's been my job since 2016 as a pro speaker. But the lived experience part is the most important part of that. And actually, lived experience is the vehicle which takes businesses and individuals from the problem to the solution, but it's not the solution. So actually what I sell is engagement. I don't sell a solution, which is really interesting to kind of, as a business model at the very least, is very interesting.
Yeah.
So how I work with kind of people and organizations is to increase engagement in the well-being and mental health initiatives they have in place already. Now, not exclusively men, but especially men do need that extra kind of shove, that bit of brutal honesty to get them to kind of engage in those kind of things. But as you allude to, it's never been always that way. I also am the founder of a business called Forging People, and the Forging People is, the reason I mention that is because Forging People came from a line in my talk. Weird how these stuff happens, that in life we either let our adversities and our challenges define us negatively for the rest of our days, or we choose for it to allow to forge something better, to forge something beautiful, to forge something powerful that never existed without you going through in the first place.
Yeah.
And then for me, that's when it all makes sense. That's where the synchronicity of the world comes in.
Yeah, amazing. And you must be here because, well, we all end up where we are because of a journey we've been on and through experiences. Nick, why do you do this? What made you decide to help people with these things? I don't want to call them problems. I just want to call them the way. I think problems maybe is the right word. Yeah.
So honestly, it was a breakdown, if I'm honest. I reached, I had mental illness as a child. So I had obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. A lot of people are familiar with that term. I'm 42 now. I've had a hard life. Although it was a lot harder a week ago. I had a full-on beard then. I'm losing hairs through lockdown, not gaining. So it wasn't really addressed. The awareness and the solutions weren't as strong as they are now. And teen and adult life, I kind of morphed into something called generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. Now, statistically, that's more common, but less commonly known. Okay. And signs of that in adult life could be that you constantly have that hamster wheel of anxiety, and as soon as one thing stops, something else replaces it. So you're fueled by nervous energy. It could be that you seek your value and accountability in the hands of other people because we haven't got the confidence and courage and conviction in ourselves to make our own stands, to stand up to people. And most importantly, we kind of stay in that comfort zone because actually I talk about what anxiety does, not what anxiety is. So how it does keep us there, it stops us living a life on our terms. But these things always begin with our conditioning. So school's brutal as an environment. So in school, people pleasing was a mechanism. But actually to the outside world, I was successful by my own definition because head prefect in every school, top grades. I was in with everybody, but actually that was a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Interestingly labeled as a warrior, sensitive and respectful. 3 things actually are quite nice kind comments, but reinforced my position that high anxiety and nerves were going to drive me. Okay. And they can. And into my corporate life, that's kind of what happened. I was fueled by that. And you see a lot of people in the accounting space for sure, but also work a lot in law and construction, high pressure industries, that they will run and run and run until they stop. And I see it so clearly now in other people, in audiences or clients, that why they get to that position of burnout or breakdown or meltdown or whatever you want to call that, is because they don't schedule recovery. every single day. They will fill up their diaries with their client stuff. They'll fill up their diaries with their family stuff, but actually where do they feature in their own lives? And they don't.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of you guys, if you check your calendars now, you don't feature in there at all, but actually we should be the priority.
Yeah.
I speak all over the world on this stuff. And we have a real problem in the UK that we consider self-care as selfish. And that goes back for years. I got brought up on the man up brigade, on the stiff upper lip brigade, on that kind of stuff. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because we mask things. It's because actually we don't tell people how we feel. We try and be what people want to see in us. We try and be what situations demand of us, but we sure don't damn show ourselves. Because actually our narrative tells us that when we show ourselves, we're going to get shot at or dismissed or not loved or judged and all those things that we tell ourselves. But as I said, you can only run for so long before you stop. And I went to a business networking meeting. For those who've been to a business networking meetings, you go along, pretend to be happy, sell your stuff and eat some breakfast. It's kind of how it works.
Yep.
So, and I've done that for a long time. And as shake hands, remember when we could shake hands? How are you? Great, thanks. And I genuinely wasn't, but we don't tell people that.
Yeah.
So I left that meeting and I sat in the car and I just basically broke down. I was sobbing, I was shaking. And for me, it's interesting that people think that feeling pain or that kind of frustration is the worst thing. Actually, it wasn't. Feeling nothing was the worst thing. To cut off feeling hate and bad, I cut off feeling love and good, that you can't have one without the other. So actually, it was living under that haze. I'd lost hope, or the hope of something better. I was frustrated, for sure. But I think looking back, it's the environment that I had around me then is exactly the same environment pretty much as I have now. But the one thing that out of place was me. And that's the reason I reached that point. And actually, for the Harry Potter fans in the room, it was like the boggart in the cupboard. Actually, that drove me to start to open up about my experiences.
Okay.
And if I'm honest with you, Amanda, it's kind of, if I get too dark about this, it was I'm going to consume it, I had to let it out. Yeah. And for me, it was going to be like my blaze of glory, death by police kind of moment, my mic drop moment. I was going to go along 2 weeks later, tell people what had happened 2 weeks before, and that was it. But actually that day changed my life forever. I stood up and I spoke to the room about what had happened to me 2 weeks before and about my mental illness and stuff. And
wow.
And everything, all that narrative that I told myself that I was going to be judged and dismissed and not loved, like all of it was wrong. That 100% it was wrong. Everybody in that room, firstly, queued up to give me their support, like every single person. Secondly, that everybody gave me a hug. I love hugs. I'm missing hugs. As an introvert, I'm still missing hugs. It's really weird. Yeah. But a third thing, and the thing that changed my life forever, was the fact that the dynamic had shifted. It wasn't about me anymore. And I saw that actually the truth is completely liberating. Yeah. That when we show vulnerability, we become bulletproof. And that when we do that, other people will trust us with their truths as well. So people that I've known for years started sharing about PTSD and grief and loss and abuse and all these things that we carry with us, but we just don't tell people about. And for me, that was a start, that was a catalyst of why I started to speak more and more. And I said, fast forward to 2016, I went full-time as a speaker. And then the business was born on the back of that early last year.
Amazing.
But if I'm honest, it was by accident, because the problem is when you're living in your story, and you find this a lot with people that share stories, is that you can either own your story or your story can own you. Yeah. And if you live there too much, it can start to own you. So it's negatively impacting my mental health. So what I did was to build something which gave me that karma kick, because actually, as much as the speaking was a passion, and helping people was a passion, the mortgage still had to be paid. It doesn't get paid on dreams and missions. So I had to start charging for this. And like I said, we spoke soon after this. So actually, it's a big, again, conditioning thing for me to come through that and seeing the value of that. But then by finding that helping other people to tell their stories, that then gave me that karma kick as well. So I guess I'm always chasing that kind of element to it too. Yeah. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I heard in that story was the fact that you shared what you were feeling. And would you say that one of the reasons why you're able to be here and you feel, I don't want to say better, I've got to watch what I say, I suppose, but you feel, you don't feel quite as sad as you did back then. Is it because you've shared your story? Is it because you've spoken to people and you have been vulnerable and you have trusted people? Has that been part of the process? Why can you do this? Why?
Well, why is a great question.
Why?
So actually, you're right. It's still something that I manage often. And what I mean by this is that coming through an experience like that, you become very self-aware, and you're quite sensitive to how things affect you. But you've also got that still running through you that you make the decisions that are right for you.
Yeah.
So I guess most recently what I found was that there was a lot of things that were affecting me that were outside of my influence. So I decided to kind of make those changes. Things like Twitter, things like lots of different things that just weren't affecting me in a very way. They weren't providing that kind of impact. And I think we need to make that call sometimes about whether something's commercially good for us or actually just from a health perspective worth that balance.
Yeah.
But I think the why is because vulnerability when practiced daily becomes a superpower, because no one has anything on us and everything's out there. And the one thing that we kind of need to break down is our own conditioning, because there's a kind of process that I like to use, and people that have heard me speak will be sick of me saying this now, but we have all the answers. We just don't ask ourselves the right questions. Okay. And if we do ask ourselves the right questions, sometimes our conditioning stops us telling the truth.
Okay.
And what I mean by this is that, and a great exercise to do is to wake up tomorrow morning and question everything you do. Like everything you say to yourself, the actions that you take. So why do you get up at 6 in the morning? Could you do with more sleep or less sleep? Why do you wake up next to them as a question maybe you haven't asked in a while? Because actually the problem is we make some, and that's a great example, we make some of these questions untouchable. And I believe that everything in us should be open to our own questioning, to be able to pull it apart and check if it's good for us or not, if they are good for us or not.
So straight away, I get defensive on this one. And I would say, yeah, okay, we could ask those questions, but asking those questions in itself is really scary, because sometimes we don't want to hear the answers that we might come up with. So we just bury our head in the sand and go, no, it'll be fine. We'll carry on the way we are. And I suppose it's great to say, ask yourself these questions, but if someone is finding it difficult anyway, they're going to find it even more difficult to ask those questions, because that's them taking control. And when you're anxious, you're not in control.
Exactly. But that's where the comfort zone part comes in, because people think comfort zones are comfortable, and they're really not. It's actually, you see this in toxic relationships, you see this in toxic professional relationships, that it's easier to stay in a position of pain and frustration than it is to do something about it. Yeah. And if okay is good enough, then be okay. But actually, a lot of the time, okay is not good enough. No. I know it's not for me. I mean, take reincarnation off the table just for a second, just in case. I could be wrong. Just in case. But take that off the table. If we get one go round at this, we want to make sure it's our go round. Yeah. And I think that there's 3 steps that I like to kind of move people through, and it's something, especially with lockdown, it's been a great example of. First of all, you need to acknowledge exactly where you are, like without the blocks on, without you kind of hacking your own kind of brain, breaking down that conditioning. So the pandemic's a great example. If you use that example, like acknowledge that this is brutal. And there's no way at all that, in terms of financially, professionally, personally, health-wise, it's been brutal. It's only when you acknowledge that can you move into survival mode. And the survival mode is, right, okay, what we have, we hold. What do I have? What can I do? What tools are at my availability? What things can I put in place to make sure that I'm here as long as I can in every sense? And actually, once you move through those 2 phases, then you can move into the exciting part, and that's the evolution part. And that's where most of my 11 weeks of lockdown have been spent so far. But throw into the fact I've got a heart condition as well, which means I'm shielded, that this is now the new normal. It's kind of like Nick Elston version 2.0. This is what's going on there. So that was interesting as well, that the heart thing, the doctor, this was discovered January last year as a hereditary heart condition. And the doctor says to me, Mr. Elston, you've got a big heart. I said, thank you very much. He said, no, it's not a good thing. It's not
growing too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that you're quite right. These questions are tough to ask and they're tougher to answer. But that's why I put a lot of focus on recovery, because a lot of the things that we do in terms of personal development and clearly defining that mental illness and mental health are 2 amazingly different things.
Yeah, that was going to be a question I was going to ask you. You know, you've said mental illness, not mental health. What does that mean? Are they not the same thing?
Having experienced both, for me, mental illness was obsessive compulsive disorder, was generalized anxiety disorder, something that was there which needed professional help. Some people require medication, some people require psychotherapy, whatever that may be. That's the difference. Mental health we all have. It's kind of like your physical health. And I think that that's the bit that I try to focus on and bring into our power every day. Because the first thing we sacrifice when we struggle with anything is choice. We give our choice away to other people, other situations. And actually, that's the only thing we have.
Yeah.
We cannot control the uncontrollable.
Yep.
We don't know what's going to happen now more than ever.
Yep.
So all we have is our proactive choice of how we go into each and every day. And we focus on what we can influence, not on what we can't influence.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get overwhelmed and disconnected right now.
Yeah. Again, and I know I keep saying it, but it sounds like anyone can do it. But if someone has anxiety, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everybody else around them. They're unable to actually function at 100%. And when you're saying just do this stuff, you're saying it to the most difficult people, not difficult people, but to people who will find it the most difficult. So what are some hints and tips that could help people who really are stuck in their head all the time, worrying about what other people think, trying to be that people pleaser? What would be the first steps that you would recommend?
See, this is a great point. There's two things you mentioned there. The first thing is that I don't actually advise. So in terms of I share what's worked for me. I share experiences and tools and tips that work for me, because actually there is no one fix all. But it's also recognizing that anxiety is a healthy mechanism. We need it. It's our brain telling ourselves there's a perceived danger. And I'll come on to the tips in a second. The second element that you really touched on, which is huge, is that there's a huge groundswell of middle people. They could be employers, they could be mental health first aiders, they could be team managers, people that are in a responsibility of a group of people, whatever that may be. Usually we get into those positions in life because we have a genuine capacity or desire to lead or learn or to care for people, or because we have our experiences of being on the negative end of that before. The problem we have is that makes us more empathic and sensitive to other people. So originally, over the 11-week period, a lot of my clients that were coming to me were on the ground level. They were kind of employees or people working under someone. And actually then that stopped. And then there's the worrying seam in the middle, that who looks after the people that looks after people. Because if you as a team manager or an employer were suddenly getting 8 people telling you all their woes and their burdens and stuff, that'd be very easy for you as an empathic, caring person to take that on yourself. Right, where do you go with that? And I think there's a real kind of problem right in the middle there. Anyway, so in terms of...
I totally get that. I used to work a lot with coaches and consultants, and a lot of them were life coaches. And so many life coaches went into coaching because they wanted to help people who had been through what they had been through, and they had found coaching had helped them. And then I was helping the life coaches, and they had nobody to talk to. So they would speak to me, and I'm an empath. I take on everybody's energy. And at the end of the day, I would be absolutely exhausted because they had shared their woes. We were meant to be doing marketing coaching, and it ended up being emotional coaching. And I got burnt out. So in 2017, I was bedridden for 4 months, end of 2016, beginning of 2017, because I'd taken on everybody's energy and I could not function. I was so tired, I couldn't get out of bed. Fortunate that my business carried on running, which was amazing. But it was a disaster. And that's because I took on other people's emotions. And that's when I pivoted and went, I can't work with life coaches anymore. And I had to protect myself. But it had to get so bad to protect myself.
Right. And I get that. And I think that's why when we first spoke, I felt that. It sounds really fluffy, but I get the vibe of other empaths, because you kind of do feel that kind of connection a lot deeper very quickly. So I guess you're quite right, though. It is easy to say that either this worked for me, maybe try this, that kind of stuff. For me, it's about daily incremental changes. So it's working out what's right for you. So one of the things I like to do is help people build a playbook. What's your playbook of stuff? So it could be the fun stuff like music, actually, that has a direct impact. It could be exercise. It could be whatever that may be, but we're building up daily incremental consistent changes. And that changes lots of different things in terms of your neurology. It changes your habits and everything else in between. But more importantly, from my perspective, from my angle, it breaks down your conditioning. It's the same with lockdown has been a walk in the park compared to easing lockdown. Because you cannot be telling a whole nation of people to stay home, save lives for 10 weeks without them feeling a little bit anxious about going back out into the world again.
Totally.
So actually the biggest challenge is yet to come.
Yeah. And I'm not leaving the house. So everyone's saying you can go shopping now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that in 2021, maybe.
High five.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll wait.
see, this, I know we spoke about speaking before, and obviously the stuff I do as a speaker, and I genuinely think, and this is just my opinion, so this is not fact-based. My opinion is that when I'm next in a boardroom or a conference hall like Excel or something like that without social distancing, I think we're well into 2022. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Without any social distancing at all. So I think that we should be really starting with the end in mind from that perspective, that creating the kind of the new reality, which will complement the in-person stuff when we're there, but actually maybe thinking in the back of your mind that's not going to be an option for foreseeable. And I think, especially in our space with the kind of work that we do and our respective kind of clients and stuff, I think that we can use this time to actually build visibility, build profile, to the point where in-person becomes an absolute premium when we do get there. Yeah. And I see this with a lot of accountants that I work with, that they will naturally go into hide mode. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that have gone into hide mode are just no longer around. They've already not been able to survive the lockdown professionally, of course. Hopefully personally, but not professionally. Yeah, so I think that a lot of the challenges right now that could be useful for your audience are this. So some of you may know I write an agony uncle column for Accounting Web. That creates its own anxiety in its own thing for it to.
Of course, Accounting Web.
Yeah.
Well done.
So that keeps my resilience and bulletproof high. I'd say. So I got that.
To you every single time you post something.
Yeah. So I also write for Receipt Bank and XU magazine and lots of different kind of things, and speak for accountants and things. So the biggest challenges I get at the moment are all around really setting boundaries. Yeah. And it's managing expectations as well. So it's recognizing the fact that a lot of people are acting from a position of fear right now. So say your clients are acting from a position of fear. I know money is I do a lot of work in the financial well-being space from a lived experience perspective. And in that space, I kind of say quite openly that money is an anxiety trigger for me. Tax is an anxiety trigger for me. Self-employment is an anxiety trigger for me. I'm screwed. Yeah.
You are, totally. You work with accountants and you work for yourself. It surrounds you every day.
So like even without the pandemic, that was always going to be a trigger for me. So if you've got that plus the pandemic, so what people were tending to find, accountants were trying to find that Boris Johnson would go on and say about the latest tax break or that latest initiative, and then their phone would immediately ring, right, how do I access that? I don't know, I've just heard the same press conference as you. So again, it's managing those expectations of, it could be that you set boundaries on the times when you answer your phone, that you don't go into the night, for example, and then you can recover and recharge properly. It could be that you make sure that you have a work, even within the house, you have a workspace which is away from your home space, or you pack everything away so it's out of mind. Yeah. Lots of boundaries you can set, but also it's about managing expectations. What can you do for your clients? What can't you do for your clients? And actually the other bit is that, where do we go in terms of doing the free stuff? Because a lot of people right now are giving away a lot of stuff for free that actually, what do you expect people to buy after all this is done? Yeah. So in my space, and I guess the same in your space, that loads of people are right, here's free stuff. Yeah. When this is all done, what have you got left to sell? Yeah. So I understand that some accountants may be doing like furlough stuff for free. Yeah. I get the process. But if you think about the time involved, and actually that your responsibility to the client, is that really the best call? So again, a lot of this is just about asking yourselves the questions, and we really do know deep down. The problem we have is that if we do struggle to share ourselves personally, that we will give that away, because actually, no worries, I haven't got the courage and conviction and confidence to say, actually, no, I need to charge for this. It's going to take 6 hours of my life, kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. And that goes.
Have you found that?
Yeah, so for me, with my clients, a lot of them have given stuff away for free, and some of them have charged. So we'll talk about furlough, for example. Some people charge a nominal fee just because there's a transaction. So one thing is, when there is a transaction of something, both people value the advice given and giving the advice. When there's no transaction, whether it be $20, $100, or even a box of chocolates, let's just say that, doesn't have to be. When there's that transaction, then the person who's listening to the advice will take action and the person giving the advice won't feel resentful. And you won't feel resentful the first time you give the advice, or the second or the third, but on your 5th client, your 10th client, and your 20th client, you start to get resentful. And resentful is an anger, and when you're angry, that then makes you get really angry about everything else around you. Then you start to upset your family, because you're living with them every day now. So your whole, it's a ripple effect. And it all started because you chose not to charge for a furlough. And I know that sounds so big to think like that, but the reason you could be arguing with your wife, or telling your children off, or snapping at the dog, or anything like that, could literally be because you did not charge for the services in your practice. And one thing that I'm trying to help my clients with that aren't charging is count the thank yous, because a thank you is still an exchange. And if you can count the thank yous, you can go back to those people that said thank you and see if you can offer something later on down the line. But it's freaking difficult. Like, it's so difficult. And accountants, and this is going to sound, they don't value what they do anyway. So I'm beating my drum about how accountants are one below a key worker, because they're essential to keep a business afloat. And I talk a lot about being a vital asset to a business. And my job right now is just to help accountants realize they are so valued. Their value is phenomenal. And the first sale they have to make is with themselves. Once they believe in their own value, that will then help them charge for their services. But all of it stems back to, as you were saying, the anxiety side of things, the stress, the overwhelm, which then leads to very, very mental health problems. Very, very.
It does. And like I said, you touched on something really interesting about, and again, it falls down into that boundaries that, like, I'm guessing that we live with the people that we do because we love them, or did once, or something like that.
We did pre-COVID anyway.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's kind of like the strongest relationships are getting tested at the minute. And that, like you said, that can have a definitive impact on how you are going into each and every day.
Yeah.
The other thing I've noticed, people that are struggling more with the mental health side of things tend to be people that are making assumptions. So, or it could be people that are really heavily engaging in the news, for example.
Yeah.
It's a weird kind of differential. But so I very early on, I chopped off. I watched the government update every evening because I don't want to bury my head in the sand. I mean, whether you believe that is true or not, that's a different presentation altogether, isn't it? But but that's the only official line that we have. So I watched that. And then the rest of the time, I'm disconnected from the news about this stuff because everything else is speculation.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of lazy journalism at the moment around that as well. So disconnect from that.
100% agree with you. I haven't watched the news for years. I know about what's happening with regards to furlough and the bounce back loan, all that kind of thing, but only because I speak to about 20 accountants every single day. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. And the one thing that I learned, must have been back in like 2013, is don't watch the news and read the papers. There's no point, because it's all people's opinions. And if you take on other people's opinions, you live in anxiety because you're really scared that your opinion isn't the right one.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I think that's the assumption part is also not trying to second guess when this is going to end or how it's going to look afterwards. Nobody knows. The world's greatest minds are changing their minds every day. So who are we to take a stab at that? So I think all we genuinely have, the one thing we're guaranteed to have is the day, is the Groundhog Day mode. And actually, there's a lot of strength in that. Means that, because anxiety to me, being quite honest with you, Amanda, was regret from the past or fear of the future. There's a very loose umbrella.
Yeah.
But very rarely was it today. Actually, today I could pretty much focus on everything if I cut my mind off from both of those things.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can do that, and actually the great thing is about the accountant mindset as a generalism is that they're very good at doing that. If we can do that, that'd be great, as long as we manage the expectations of our clients along the way during that day.
One of the things that I talk a lot about is when you're clear, it takes away the fear. So if you are just clear on what you need to do today and get through today, and you control today, because that's something that you can do, unless the tsunami hits or something like that. But we can control our actions by not leaving the house, and we can control our actions by showing up for our clients, and we can control our actions today. So when you're clear and have control over your life, it takes away the fear. 150%. And I am a self-confessed control freak because it stops me from living in anxiety. So the moment I don't have control, simple things like we're in the process of doing up a weekend flat in Hastings. And if I tried to pass off responsibility for organizing it. I was more anxious because I had no idea what was going on than I would be taking control and organizing it myself. So I had to take it back because I needed to know what was going on. Same with my business. I have to know what's going on. And if I don't, then I'm anxious and it's horrible. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That you say focus on today and not the past or the future, because that's the only thing that we can control.
Yeah, but again, once you do that as like exercise, do that as a regular workout, it just becomes the new norm.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the past kind of 11 weeks ago, none of my stuff was online. Everything was in person, and overnight it was wiped out.
Yeah,
literally, it was brutal. It was brutal.
Yeah.
But now everything's online, and literally every kind of element of what was done before is now done online, which. So again, it is that evolution mode is that we need to get people into as soon as they can.
Yeah.
It's things like I've redesigned how I want my working week, because it easily gets out of our control. I've now redesigned my working week on how I want it to actually finish that bit earlier, why I started doing this stuff in the first place, and why to have that kind of extra kind of social time and stuff.
Yeah.
And now is a great time to do this. I mean, even on a very basic level, having a shave after years of having the brand of the cap and the beard.
Yeah.
It's a great time to test new stuff because everyone's making it up as they go along.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anybody thinks that they're massively in control of everything, they're wrong.
Yeah, totally. Don't look at the outside.
Exactly, yeah. Again, it's another masking thing. And I think that's the reason why I think that what I've been described as brutally honest, that brutal honesty will sometimes shine through. And so again, they're kind of what I call BFOs, so blinding flashes of the obvious. What I say and how I work is not reinventing the wheel. It's basically shining a light on something, mental health, whatever that may be, but without the filter, without the Instagram filter on it. So it's just exactly how it is and what it was. And I've taken that stance from a very, very early day. So when I first started speaking, as I said, the mortgage doesn't get paid on dreams and missions. So 36 hours a week I was delivering for Tesco, delivering groceries.
Yeah.
And then doing the rest of the time trying to get my business up and running as a fully fledged thing. And the thing would have been to hide, but I didn't. I went on LinkedIn, my Tesco gear, and said, like, this is what I'm doing to keep the dream alive. And actually that honesty has always stood me in good stead because people know they get the absolute truth. Yeah,
absolutely. And if people trust you, then when they're, I don't want to say dealing with you, but when they're working with you or listening to you, they aren't going to be anxious around that. They're not going to second guess what you're saying because they know that you speak the truth, which is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So do you have any percentages of how many people actually suffer with anxiety? Do you know any percentages around that? Do you think it's 50%, 75%? How many people? Because I'm sure that it's probably everyone in some shape or form. Have you lost me?
Yes, you did. So I think we're back.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, cool. So my question was,
I think.
You think? Can you hear me?
Yes, bear with me a second.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so what's super cool about that is that would send me into absolute anxiety because I know what my values are and what I stand for. I think I've lost you again. Have I lost you again? Yes.
Yes, I'm just going to switch Wi-Fi a second. Bear with me.
Okay.
So,
one of the things that makes me really anxious is technology breaking, for example.
Yeah.
So I know my values, and one of my values is my brand, and I want to show up as professional and be able to do things. And if I can't, then I go into anxiety. So we're going live, which is great, but the anxiety is kicking in. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you understand what it is that triggers your anxiety, you just have to start to manage your breath and manage your thoughts and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If someone's anxiety is triggered, and we'll leave on this thought, and people can reach out to you for more information. But if your anxiety is triggered, what would be one or two things that you would recommend people could do to help them?
Okay, so for me, you already mentioned breathing. Breathing's really important. A lot of anxiety can be nipped at the bud before you get to that point. So again, I meditate daily. I do lots of self-care things every day, even if I'm feeling good. I still do those things. But in the moment, I think it's good to have a keyword. So it could be something I just use, stop. So if I find like this, I'm thinking, right, okay, I could be like lose my stuff over this. I'm like, oh my God, and
totally.
bang on the keyboard kind of thing. So stop. Literally, you kind of shove yourself back a little bit and then you go back into it. It's kind of like you step out of yourself for a little bit. And once you get used to that, it's a really powerful way of doing things. Great example, I was speaking at a stadium in Bristol for a stadium event last year. And just before I was about to have the walk-on music played and stuff, I was connecting to my MacBook for the slides. I couldn't remember the password for this thing I use 50 times a day.
Oh, wow.
And the anxiety in me, actually hearing the guy MC like calling my name and stuff, and I was thinking, right, I'm going to bang on this keyboard until I randomly get the password right. It was never going to work. So actually for me, I had just, right, okay, step back, breathed, went back in and typed it straight away.
Brilliant.
Because we need to recognise that when we go into that kind of primal mode, we need to come back from that. So and you mentioned it earlier on, the power is in the clarity, actually getting that clarity over your thoughts, not the anxiety. Yeah. Same with public speaking, is that a lot of people remain anxious when they speak or have the nerves when they speak because they keep breathing and speaking from up here.
Yes.
Just slow down a little bit and breathe a little bit deeper. You'll just find that flow. You'll find that calmness. So it's a real human flaw that the more anxious we get, the kind of we don't leave that state. So yes.
One of the things that I do quite a lot of is box breathing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, I haven't. No. What's that?
Breathing. So you breathe in for 7, you hold for 4, and breathe out for 8. And it's beautiful. And it gives me a bit of a rush to my head and gives me a lot of clarity. But it also really calms my state. And I would say, like, yes, I'm anxious, but I think I'm not abnormally anxious with how often I get anxious, but I find that that's probably because I focus on it and I breathe a lot. Breathing is huge, absolutely huge. But look up box breathing. It's really good, really good. Also helps me.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah. So
I do a version of the kind of the in for 6, hold for 6, out for 6, but I like that because and actually different mechanisms have a different effect.
Yeah, exactly.
You would think it's just the same thing, but it's not. So I think that it's interesting when we are in that space where we're thinking, is this anxiety or is this choice?
Yeah.
That for me, it's all about the compulsion. Am I compelled to do this or do I want to do this?
Yeah.
So a great example is if I phoned you up now and said, right, Amanda, can you do this for me? And you don't want to do it. You go, yes, just because you just want to get it done. And actually, if you don't want to do that, the best, and if that's actually a really common thing, give yourself that step back again. So even on the phone, oh, can you babysit tonight? I'll have to get back to you. Bear with me a second. Sorry, no. You got to give yourself that step back. It's a lot easier to say no on the second time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever that may be. And you've got those challenges. And with clients especially, if they're in a position of anxiety and fear themselves, by taking that step back, even remotely, even by phone, that will work very well.
Amazing. Some great tips, Nick. That's so fantastic.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, amazing. How can people get in touch with you if they would like some support or to come and hear you talk, or what's the next step for everybody?
It's very clear next step. So nickelston.com, you can find my speaking stuff, and forgingpeople.com for everything else.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. And are you on LinkedIn? Do people use LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. That's the one. Well, that and YouTube. I've got a free YouTube channel as well, lots of different stuff on it. But but LinkedIn is my last bastion of social media.
No, that's amazing. They can follow you on that. And thank you